Inside every museum is a hidden world. Now, for the first time, cameras have been allowed behind the scenes at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Here we are, a wonderful piece of theatrical bling.
Home to more than 2 million wonders of art, design and performance.
This gentleman has a little cloak that you can lift up and see what he's wearing underneath.
But only a small part of the collection is on display.
One of our showpieces, designed for the Queen. Every time I see it, I notice something that I didn't spot before.
Inside the stores are treasures many of us never see.
His eyes are open. He looks like as if he's about to grab my hand or something.
And an army of experts is at work.
This bit always makes me feel a bit like a plastic surgeon stitching up the skin.
Bringing masterpieces to light.
It does feel like a magical world because it feels like you've been shrunk to their size.
Restoring our heritage and breathing new life into fragile marble.
Leonardo da Vinci.
To keep the past alive for all of us.
The thing about the V&A is that it's a national collection. It's owned by everybody.
There are more than 2 million items in the V&A's collection. Not only do they belong to us all, but many have been given to the museum by us, straight from our homes and wardrobes.
So many of our pieces are donated, and not just donated from, the most affluent people or queens and kings. Like, they're donated from people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds. There is a kind of sense of responsibility that you're looking after not only their object, but their legacy and their stories. This one's an interesting one, 1964.
In the fashion department, a major new exhibition is being planned, celebrating breakthrough fashion designer Mary Quant.
It's such great fabric, it's a wonderful pattern.
Her trailblazing miniskirts helped the 60s swing. But they're missing a vital example.
Despite having the largest collection of Mary Quant in the world, we do not have and have not been able to find any dresses from 1964 which are above the knee. People don't seem to realise, but miniskirts weren't tiny, tiny mini as soon as it was 1960. So it's a really important one for us to show that kind of gradual evolution of the hemline from just on the knee to significantly above the knee.
To fill the gap in their collection, curators Steph and Jenny are calling on the British public for help.
Do you happen to have the kind of miniskirt your mother would have described as an extended belt? If you still have it, and it was designed in the early 60s by Mary Quant, the Victoria and Albert Museum wants to borrow it.
So there are various ones which stand out, aren't there?
Following the appeal, potential donations have been flooding in.
This is a definite yes.
Oh, yeah.
A woman from Yorkshire is offering a particular dress, which could be just the one they're looking for.
I guess this one with the photograph here of Jenny Fenwick.
Yeah, I love that dress.
In 1964, 17-year-old Jenny Fenwick spotted a mini dress from Mary Quant's Ginger Group label in Topshop in Sheffield. She's held on to it for the last 55 years.
It's a mustard yellow, almost kind of golden colour. It's two-layered, and the top layer is a kind of lace. It's got a really lovely turned-over Peter Pan collar. And then it has these two lovely details of kind of pointed flowers. It's a great piece. So she says something really lovely here. Mary Quant seemed to epitomise a style which was different to the norm and meant that teenage girls like me didn't have to dress like their mothers. That's a kind of recurring theme that we keep coming across with the women that we speak to, this sense that they just refuse to conform and dress like the generation before. And I think for many of them, Mary really represented that. It was change.
That sums it up, doesn't it?
Definitely. Before Mary set up in 1955, a lot of fashion It was corseted. It wasn't very comfortable to wear. With Mary's garments, it was a moment of change.
Quant burst onto the fashion scene by opening her first boutique in London when she was still in her early 20s.
A young woman has changed the outlook on clothes of the new generation, Mary Quant. The artist in her sensed that millions of young girls longed for something entirely different. Being one of them, so did she.
People try to put us to down. Talking about my generation.
Her colourful designs boasted sharp tailoring and clean lines, partly inspired by Italian sportswear.
When Mary Quant invades new realms of fashion, bright young girls are interested, and so is the national press.
Her scandalously high hemlines made headlines, but for the women who wore them, it was about far more than just shock value.
I mean, literally, the dresses, the way that they were cut, were not constricting the body at all. You could run for a bus, you could go out partying in the evening. And that sense of freedom for women is really embodied and fun.
On paper, Jenny's mustard mini is the perfect fit for the gap in the collection.
We've got the photograph of Mary wearing the dress. So in a way, it brings the two together, you know, the brand leader and the customer.
But after decades in Jenny's attic, Steph isn't sure the dress will be up to scratch.
There's kind of practical things that you have to bear in mind when, like if we acquire things, the condition of it. Our conservation team are going to have to assess everything. If there's too much work needed to make things stable to go on display, then we can't really consider them.
The museum has relied on donations ever since it was founded.
V&A stands for Victoria and Albert. It's the name over the front door. But we all say V&A. We lose sight of the fact that they are the founders of the museum.
In fact, some of the very first items that kick-started the whole collection were gifts from the royal couple. Now these founding objects are to be reunited for the first time in a special exhibition marking 200 years since the birth of Victoria and Albert. Masterminded by curator Julius.
You don't want to get next to me in the coffee queue, really, in the canteen, and ask me about Victoria and Albert, because you won't get away for lunch.
Julius starts with a list of the first items ever given to the museum.
The key to our research on the royal gifts to the V&A is this inventory. Top of the list, Her Majesty the Queen. So there's a list of year by year, all the objects she gave. Enormous variety, including examples of food from Siam, edible samples. So the challenge is to try and find all these objects and to bring them, the best of them, together as a sort of lost royal collection. And the first thing there, 1852, the 9 examples of India lacquer work boxes.
Julius has unearthed one of these Indian marvels from the museum's stores.
Look at that. Wow. It's lovely. It's gorgeous.
It's a writing case fit for a queen.
And look, underneath, look, there's the inventory number painted on it for 1852, which tells us that this is the 4th object acquired by the museum in 1852, which makes it one of the first objects of the whole museum.
Queen Victoria's writing case is thought to have been made in Kashmir, then part of British India.
Try and get that last bottom bit out. I bet that comes out as well. Yes, look at that.
The case comes complete with a knife and scissors for cutting and sharpening quill pens. Hand-carved by specialist woodworkers, its delicate flower motifs were applied with a tiny brush. A final coat of varnish, made from tree resin, gives the box a lustrous sheen.
This simple little pencil case, it looks like it's made of gold. It looks like it's a precious metal object that would have cost a fortune to make and would be fit for a queen, for an empress. This is an object where you have to put the brakes on. It hooks you. You start to see inside the exquisite finish, and you think of the craftsman and the time it's taken and the care.
When the writing case was made, Britain was in the grip of a craze for correspondence. In 1840, the penny post had been introduced, making letter writing cheaper and easier than ever before, and creating a huge market for writing accessories.
Today, it would be the equivalent of our pocket telephone. It's the convenient means of communication. Perhaps we take some of our phones too much for granted, and we forget that they're part of this long history of luxury utility objects. What a treat for us. Imagine Queen Victoria being given this.
Queen Victoria herself was a prolific writer, penning copious amounts of letters and diaries every day.
You could imagine her dipping her pen in that little inkwell there, two inkwells, two colours of ink, red and black. You can imagine maybe there's a letter out there somewhere saying, "Dear Albert, I'm writing this with my new pen case from Kashmir."
But the case will need some help to look its best.
The question now is, how do we show it? Ideally, it would feel as though it's not set up in a museum, but on Queen Victoria's writing desk. We don't want the mount to get too conspicuous.
No, exactly.
Julius is hoping the writing case will take a starring role in the bicentenary exhibition. Now he must try to track down the other early objects given by Victoria and Albert to go alongside it.
The big challenge is to really bring things together from around the museum on this one theme, this one story of Victoria and Albert. The objects have to punch above their weight, and so there's a lot hanging on this display.
The museum has always been a magnet for donations of precious possessions from across the world.
So this is a lovely woven Baluchari sari from West Bengal, late 19th century. It's really interesting because of the figurative elements in it. So you have these Europeans on howdahs sitting on the elephants.
South Asian design expert Divya has helped to build the museum's collection of 450 saris and sari fragments.
A sari is an elegant and infinitely adaptable Indian woman's garment. It consists of a piece of fabric that can be anything from 6 to 9 meters long, and it's not cut. That's what makes it so wonderful, that it is unstitched but drapeable into this incredibly beautiful garment. We have a lot of cotton saris that are beautiful because of that simplicity. And then we have the other end, which are saris that show an incredible level of skill and craftsmanship.
But there's a gap in the collection.
We don't have many saris from the 1920s through to the 1980s, and this is a particularly important group of saris because they contain chiffon saris, tissue, silk saris, and lace saris, none of which are well represented.
Now, a woman in London could have the answer. Shalale Barlow has offered the museum her remarkable personal collection.
My grandmother gave my mother 365 saris. No one would have worn half of them. I mean, there were just too many.
The saris date back as far as the 1930s, when Shalale's family were part of the Indian aristocracy.
My grandmother was born in 1918. She was from Bhopal state, which is in the center of India, and she was a niece of the Nawab of Bhopal, who was, in those days, they were princely states.
The Nawabs ruled over the semi-sovereign state of Bhopal at the time of the British Raj. Shalale's grandmother's valuable sari collection built up over a lifetime, is now almost all that remains of the family's old way of life.
This sari actually would have been part of her wedding trousseau. My grandmother, because she was very aware that she was beautiful and had green eyes, almost everything is green because it suited her. And she was also deliciously vain. So she made sure that that photograph was given to every cousin, child, grandchild, every house you went to, and that's one of those. Because she said, oh, it's a very good photograph of me.
Shalali's grandmother travelled all over the world, but one country had a special place in her heart.
She always said, if I have a daughter, I'll make sure she's educated in England, because everything English is best. We were brought up with that feeling. If it's English, it is the best quality, the best everything.
Shalali studied and then settled in the UK. But now she is wondering what to do with the sari collection.
I don't have a daughter. Normally these would go to your daughter, just as they went from my great-grandmother to my grandmother, from my grandmother to my mother, and then on to me. I only have 2 sons. My mother died on the 9th of February 2018. My brother and I acutely felt we had a legacy to look after. And someone said, why don't you sell them? The idea of selling my grandmother's treasured sari collection, they should be preserved somewhere.
Before Shalali can be sure her grandmother's saris are what Divya is looking for, she'll need to take them in for a detailed examination.
I hope that they become items that are appreciated, that are living items, because they're not living until somebody sees them.
Down in the Technical Services workshop, the team must find ways of displaying objects of every shape and size imaginable.
There's a kind of constant back and forth between working on the mount and fitting it.
Technician Ben is crafting an invisible Perspex mount fit for a Queen's writing case.
I've just tried to follow the line of the lid, which actually slopes off, just to make sure that we're holding it nicely in two points.
It's been plucked from the stores to be the star exhibit for the celebration of Queen Victoria's birth.
So, yeah, not much gap at all. Very pleased with that. And hopefully, pretty much invisible once installed.
The writing case first went on show at the Great Exhibition of 1851. This landmark event drew huge crowds to displays of the world's finest manufactured goods. And no one was more fascinated than Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria visited the Great Exhibition 33 times, and it's very likely that she would have first set eyes on this little writing case on one of those 33 visits. And I'd love to think that she had it initially as a souvenir of the Great Exhibition, which she saw as Albert's first great achievement.
Championed by Albert, the blockbuster exhibition ran for just 6 months. But its runaway success led to the founding of the V&A.
The V&A is the legacy institution of the 1851 Great Exhibition.
The exhibition's profits helped establish a museum of design excellence that would be filled with inspiring objects like the Queen's writing case, reflecting the latest trends in Victorian art and design.
It was the Indian collections that caused the real sensation at the Crystal Palace in 1851. The Victorians thought Indian was going to be the future, and of course the British were ruling India, so the commercial potential of all these crafts from the subcontinent were very exciting.
Let me have a closer look.
Yeah.
In the stores, Julius has tracked down another exquisite Indian object from among Victoria and Albert's donations.
Was this 1860?
Well, in terms of when it arrived, that's all we can be sure. It is a completely breathtaking object.
Like the writing case, this salver, or serving dish, takes functional design to new heights. It was made in British India from gold and silver, using an intricate technique called filigree.
It's almost painful to look at, given knowing the labour involved. You know, how many people went blind to make that?
Filigree involves weaving together strands of metal so finely you can see through them.
I hadn't really appreciated just how translucent it is, but if we can light it right.
Put the light on it in a particular way to try and make the most of that. It's gorgeous. That'd be great.
We'll take it, wrap it up. Yeah.
The salver joins the writing case in Julius's carefully curated Victorian time capsule, which opens to the public in 5 days' time. The Mary Quant mini dress has arrived at the textile workshop. But this dress partied hard in its past life, putting even the V&A's virtuoso conservators to the test.
I can see that I've got very definite staining there, there and there. I've talked to the curators and they would like it to be as it was when it was first bought, which isn't really possible because obviously it's had a life between now and then.
To get the dress exhibition ready, Frances must find the correct formula to remove the stains.
There is a certain amount of science to it, unfortunately. You've got to know what your materials are made of, a bit like a hospital. You've got to know what chemicals you're putting on and what chemicals you're taking off and what the long-term effects might be. To be a textile conservator is a bit like being a kind of nurse or a doctor, but your patients don't talk back, which is quite useful.
Following a preliminary wash in pH-controlled detergent, Frances deploys her secret weapon.
So I'm going to add what we call a chelating agent, which is trisodium citrate. So though this looks like completely clean water, it's not. It has got this trisodium citrate in it. This will be going into the fibres as I'm pressing up and down. It's an awful lot of work. It's a bit like going to the gym. In fact, worse. It's partly because, you know, you've got 4 layers here, because you've got a lining and the lace.
The lace is cotton, but the slip beneath is acrylic, one of the modern man-made fibres that Mary Quant embraced to produce her mass-market designs.
You know, it was kind of high fashion, but just about at affordable prices for us, because they would have been kind of young teenagers, and they wanted kind of one party dress, and they could afford these. And that's probably why they've survived, really, because they've probably got very good memories of them.
There's me. So you can
When she paid 8 guineas for it 50 years ago, Jenny had no idea she was acquiring a piece of fashion history.
the hem of the dress had been taken up because I'd shortened it. I mean, it was short, and I shortened it even more. It was like a bit of a rebellion. My dress is going to be short, you know.
Yeah.
My father did not.
I was going to say, what did your mother and father think to that?
Not happy. The thought of throwing it away just never entered my head.
Yeah.
Because it was very special.
Part of your past, really.
Part of my past.
Frances is in the final stage of reviving Jenny's dress.
It's important that we don't leave anything in it, because we don't want to interfere with the chemistry of the dress.
Even impurities from the water can affect the fabric.
So the water that's running through this hose is not tap water. It's what we call deionized water, which is a sort of semi-purified water. And so we're not leaving anything behind in the dress. You're fairly confident that you know what's going to happen, but washing is worrying because every process in conservation is meant to be reversible, and washing isn't. If something goes wrong, it goes wrong.
Frances will only know the result of her work once the dress has been thoroughly rinsed and dried.
Dresses have been brought in by people who actually own them. You feel very responsible towards them, I think, because you're not looking at a piece of cloth. You're looking at a piece of history, but a piece of personal history to the women that brought them in. And you want to do the very best for them. You want their dress to be able to hold its own within the exhibition.
The museum's stores are a treasure trove, keeping safe the objects that have shaped our history. But carefully stowed amongst the gems of the past are the potential treasures of the future.
So this is one of the storage areas of the museum, and it's where we keep our rapid response acquisitions, or most of those that are not on display.
Curator Corinna heads up a SWAT team of experts known as the Rapid Response Unit.
We've got quite a broad range of objects. Here we've got Lufsig. Lufsig is an IKEA-made soft toy that became an object of political protest in Hong Kong. We have 5 pairs of these Christian Louboutin nudes. You can see that they come in a variety of different skin tones. Here we have the internet-enabled Hello Barbie. Rapid response collecting offers this incredible opportunity to look at the world and to look at what design is today. So it's about things that can be very modest, such as a set of Katy Perry endorsed eyelashes, or deeply challenging, such as a 3D printed gun.
Corinna and her team try to capture new objects they think will be of lasting interest as soon as they appear.
We need to move fast. Resonance, the buzz, the fizz of the object might not be there if we can't get it in as quickly as possible.
To track down the treasures of tomorrow, Corinna has to hit the streets.
Have you seen this guy's nice little sign and set of stickers? Rapid response is about being curious. Lots of my friends might describe me as nosy. I always say it's curiosity.
With the Extinction Rebellion climate protesters taking over the streets in London, Corinna has their distinctive logo in her sights.
See, this lady's got one on her high-vis vest. This gent is wearing a badge. Look, there's another sticker here. This one's nice because it's a green example. I've seen fewer of those. I'm interested in the extinction symbol because it has shown and given an identity to a climate protest in a way that we have not known in the recent past.
The symbol was designed by an anonymous street artist back in 2011 and adopted by Extinction Rebellion in 2018.
It's a bit like, you might say, Nike or Mercedes. These are very simple graphic elements that now speak for so much more.
The design, a circle containing an hourglass X, symbolises time running out for the planet. It echoes the simple logo dreamed up by artist Gerald Holton for a 1958 anti-nuclear demo, which went on to become instantly recognisable as a symbol of the peace movement.
The Extinction Rebellion symbol, it's become something like the peace symbol. It's a visual identity that we can all recognise. How does the extinction symbol relate to other designs of the past? Is it going to be as important? I can't answer that question. I don't know the future, but I know it's important in the here and now. It's about the question of design, how that has galvanised public concern, but also having a sense of where they fit within the history of graphic design or within the history of protest design. That is important.
In the Asia department, Shalali Barlow has brought in her grandmother's cherished saris.
Oh, how fabulous. This is a very exciting moment.
Curator Divya must now decide if they fill the gap in her collection.
This is the sari from the photograph.
Oh, this is beautiful.
My goodness.
But it's a gorgeous colour. It really
It is. It just...
So you've not seen it out like this
Never.
for a long time?
This was probably her favourite sari.
It's so fine, and it's shiny,
Yes.
and very elegant when you wear it.
Woven from gold-wrapped thread and green silk, the sari fabric is known as tissue silk. Tissue saris can be heavy to wear and sometimes need polishing to retain their sheen.
And when one walks, I suppose that's what the light picks up. is
Exactly,
the
yeah.
shimmering
So you've
of
got to
it.
be quite careful what you wear underneath. But just look at how fine that is. It's beautiful.
It's just so beautiful.
With the image to bring it to life, the gold tissue sari more than earns a place in the museum.
This is the printed chiffon. It's the rosebuds.
But Divya's also interested in a less showy sari.
You've picked the nicest one.
Oh, of course.
I think you have. No, I do.
One of the things that we have very little of is a lack of French chiffon saris.
Mm-hmm. My grandmother, even for her ordinary chiffon saris, she would go to Paris to choose them and have them shipped and then embroidered.
Paris was the world leader in high-quality fabrics in the 1940s and 50s, and elite Indian women of the time made sure they were buying the best.
Chiffon sari is particularly important because it reflects a moment in time when the women of India's royal families were travelling to Paris, they were buying French chiffons to wear in India, and French manufacturers, a few of them, were producing chiffon in sari length, so they changed, they adapted their production. So you have high-end, elegant French fashion meeting high-end, elegant Indian fashion. It fills a huge gap in our collection.
I'm so pleased.
Donations are welcome because they fill gaps in our collection, but importantly, the donor is able to give us information about that object. They can give us lots of information that's very personal.
That's totally my grandmother's colours. Her room was always in pink, in any house she lived in. There was always a pink rose motif. She would have absolutely loved it.
Shillelagh knows that her saris will be preserved, looked after, and most of all, that they will be treasured by the V&A and by the nation.
It's an unreal feeling that the museum should accept something from my grandmother. My grandmother would be so happy. She said the best quality of things comes from this country. And so to have her saris here as part of this, I couldn't do her more proud. And really, I feel so incredibly happy.
When someone gives a treasured heirloom to the museum, the staff must take on the burden of keeping it pristine forever.
Some pieces that you get have been in families for hundreds of years and they've been passed down generation to generation, so they need to feel reassured that it's well cared for. I hope we're able to reassure them of that.
Working around objects that have been donated, you feel a sense of responsibility for somebody's memories and somebody's, life story. So you just have to be very, very careful.
A century ago, the children of one of Britain's most eminent Victorian artists donated one of their father's last oil paintings to the museum.
Any artwork, we cherish every last millimetre of it.
The Pilgrim Outside the Garden of Idleness was painted by pre-Raphaelite artist Edward Burne-Jones before his death in 1898. It's just returned from being out on loan to Tate Britain. Before it can go back on display, conservators Yuki and Zoe must check its fragile antique frame.
This is a wooden frame, but the decoration ages notoriously badly.
and it becomes very brittle.
Burne-Jones is one of the most influential painters of the 19th century, famous the world over for his enchanted visions of myth and legend. Now, this masterpiece must be transported from the workshop to the gallery wall, with the help of the veteran of the Technical Services Department, Alan.
If anyone's coming, Sandy, shoo them out the way for me. Whenever anyone needs anything doing, they need a mount made for a piece of jewellery, or they need something framed, they come to us. That's it, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Being moved is one of the riskiest moments in any artwork's life.
Let's slide them on as it is now. I don't normally think about what the object is. It might be by Rodin, or it might be by Pissarro. If you start worrying about how much things cost, then you start getting nervous.
Whoa! So what's your motto?
Don't drop it.
Tomorrow, Alan will lead a team of 12 to rehang the quarter-of-a-ton Burne-Jones painting. And as everyone knows, the key to successful decorating is all in the preparation.
You just have to do a bit of everything in technical services. So, I mean, you know, we haven't got the paint, so we just have to make up the paint.
It's very much a problem-solving job.
It's getting better.
It is getting better. We're getting there.
It is getting better. I keep thinking we should be sticking some burnt umber in it, putting a bit of that in. Is that any better? God, tell me it's better. Well, you know.
I think it's added something to it.
I'll tell you what. It still needs, what does it need?
I think it still needs red.
There is a colour theory, but I can never remember.
While Alan prepares the wall, conservator Yuki has discovered that a fragment of the frame has broken off. It has to be fixed before the big move. The frame may look like wood, but it's less solid than it seems.
This frame is old and fragile, and also the material, this is called compo.
Compo, or composition, is a material made from chalk, animal glue, and linseed oil. When wet, it's easily moulded into intricate shapes, but decades after drying out, it requires the lightest of touches. Yuki applies glue to the fragment to fix it in place, and then syringes in latex to seal the gap. A final tap should ensure the frame is safe for Alan to handle in the morning.
Glue nicely.
Whatever the age of the object, every new acquisition gets a thorough MOT from the conservation team before joining the collection. Rapid Response Curator Corinna has just taken delivery of the latest donation to the museum.
So these are the Extinction Rebellion flags.
And these go on the pole?
Yes.
With conservator Claire, she's examining several new objects chosen to represent the Extinction Rebellion logo.
I've never acquired something of that nature, so we do need your advice. This is one of the wood blocks used to print the Extinction Rebellion logo.
This low-tech plywood printing block has helped the protesters reproduce their streamlined logo, sending their message viral.
So this is the declaration. It's the first piece of print that set the Extinction symbol and the Extinction Rebellion logo into public. Quite a rare thing, because they printed a few. There was such interest that they went much faster than anticipated, so an early example is quite a privilege to get our hands on. That's great.
It's Claire's job to make sure these items, which weren't designed to last forever, are immaculately preserved for years to come.
It looks fine. It's got a little bit of dirt. There's some ink loss, as we'd expect, along the creases. But it looks fine as well. It doesn't need any treatment.
Often the objects are quite varied in what they are made from. Plastic is delicate, paper is delicate,
And so the challenges there are inks that might fade very quickly or print that is transferable. They often pose quite surprising challenges to how we look after them in the museum.
With the OK from Claire, Corinna plans to get the objects on display in her rapid response gallery as soon as possible.
I'd like advice as to A, how we should look after it, and B, how if displayed.
It could go onto a sheet of Perspex with some magnets, but then it could be stored in just a little Melanex sleeve,
And
folded up.
You would store it folded?
Yeah, you want it to remain as it was.
Slings, drill, 12 people.
It's the day of the big move for the Pre-Raphaelite oil painting. And technician Alan is marshalling his troops.
The large Ben Jones painting came back from the Tate. It's going back on the wall. The only problem is it doesn't fit in the lift, so we've got to go a bit old school and carry it up the stairs. It's a Victorian building. It's not designed particularly fantastically for moving those big heavy objects. It's got a gilt frame on it, so we have to be particularly careful of the frame as you're carrying it up the stairs.
For 100 years, the museum has kept the painting safe. It's now down to Alan to make sure it survives today's arduous operation.
Although I might have moved, 10,000 paintings.
Came out easy enough, didn't it?
The really big stuff doesn't get moved that often, so you really have to stop and think before you do it. 1, 2, 3. There you go. It needs to be held firmly, but gently, a bit like you're holding a baby. Okay, so we're going to lift it and we're going to try and do it in one go.
Manoeuvring a 3-metre-long quarter-ton masterpiece up multiple flights of stairs is fraught with difficulties.
Yeah, straight up. So, yes, put it down. It's big, I'm thinking it's heavy, the frame is gilt, it's fragile. So we're got to get to the top of the landing, okay? You look at the frame and you think, right, how do I move that frame without any of those bits falling off? But you can't hold it anywhere else, you have to hold it by the frame. The worst that can happen is that someone could drop one of the slings and the painting will slide back down the stairs, Okay, one more. Okay, watch that frame.
Having safely made it to the top of the stairs,
You want to start pumping the dandies up, please?
the team lifts the frame onto a scaffold, ready for the final stage.
And, okay, put it down on the pallet truck. There's one last job, is to get the picture onto the brackets. Okay, we're going to lift ours on now. Once it's on the brackets, everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Okay, I think we're on now. Let's see if the picture's level. It's the big reveal. If you look in the middle of that level there. Oh, look, it's absolutely perfect.
Now, Burne-Jones's painting can be admired by visitors again, just as his children wanted when they donated it a century ago.
When you've moved one of those big things, there is a sense of relief. It's satisfying, especially when it's those big objects, because, people notice it when it's not there. Big gap on the wall, and it's when it gets back up there, there is a sense of completion. It looks, you stand back when everything's gone, everyone's gone, and the scaffold's gone, and you think, oh, well, look, wow, I put that painting on the wall, it looks great.
The Victoria and Albert Bicentenary exhibition is just days away.
In this room, we're going to bring together the forgotten royal collection. Many of the star objects that Victoria and Albert themselves gave to the museum that have never been brought together before.
Julius is hoping to transport visitors back to the earliest days of the museum.
A bit of a treasure, that one. A museum object in its own right. I'd like to try to give a sense of stepping back in time, trying to find an original showcase from 1860 or so, getting the wall colour exactly right. It needs to look like a Victorian exhibition. So the big plan today is we get all the pictures around the walls, We get the objects into the case. That'll be enough for today. What do we owe Victoria and Albert? This museum certainly would not be here but for them.
Victoria and Albert's gifts helped to launch what was originally known as the Museum of Manufactures. The couple gave the museum its first home at the Royal Residence, Marlborough House. 5 years later, the museum moved to South Kensington, and it was renamed in honour of Victoria and Albert in 1899.
Putting together objects that belong to Victoria and Albert and that Victoria and Albert personally chose to give to this museum gives you an opportunity to challenge ideas of what their taste really was, what they liked and what they valued. They really were quite discerning. They were collectors. They gave each other gifts, and we'd like to think of them savouring them together before handing them over to the public to enjoy as well.
After years in the shadows, Queen Victoria's very first donation, the writing case, is taking the spotlight.
Is its made-to-measure mount. Oh, you got a piece of paper underneath there. No, I think that looks really, really grand. This showcase has never been so proud of itself. It's showmanship, pure and simple. You want people to stop and look. You have a passion, a conviction, so you want to share it. You know, it's only a little few objects, but the impact, the splash, I hope is going to be enormous.
Over in the Rapid Response Gallery, the newest acquisitions to the museum are taking their place on display.
We've got a declaration and Anne's coming with that. We've got to find a way to fly the flags. That's so totally brilliant. It's been critical to get the design story at the forefront. That's my interest in the object. That's the reason for bringing it into the museum. And that's what I'm seeking to communicate through the display. I'm so pleased that we've been able to make it look like a piece of print material rather than something precious. I mean, it is immensely precious, but I didn't want it to look flattened and lifeless. There's always that moment when you take an object that you've seen in the street and you put it in a case, and it does transform it. I think particularly with the flags, it was quite hard to imagine how they might take shape or have a presence here in the gallery. And actually they look wonderful. And there's a really strong vista that as people come up into the gallery, they will see them. It'll be interesting to see what the reaction is.
For now, the Extinction Rebellion logo joins other symbols of social change, from umbrellas used by the Hong Kong campaigners to the burkini.
The V&A looks after our objects, the public's objects, the things that make us as individuals, but they're also the thing that defines us as societies or periods of time. That also includes objects of today, which you might think don't need looking after. But what we find is that very quickly the objects that tell us about the here and now are yesterday's things. We keep them here at the V&A.
She's really heavy, this one, and all of her weight is.
In the fashion department, the Mary Quant exhibition is about to be unveiled.
The hands are splayed quite wide on these mannequins, so to be honest, I'm taking them off so they don't accidentally knock things off as we go through the shop.
We specially commissioned mannequins that were very similar to the ones that Mary Quant used, so very stylised hands, moulded heels on shoes.
Jenny Fenwick's mustard yellow mini has been cleaned, dried and pressed. and is taking pride of place.
We're putting the mustard-coloured lace dress right in the middle of this lineup. The lineup is really a kind of a chronology showing the rise of the miniskirt. She looks good.
She does look good. She looks perfect.
They look brilliant.
This is a kind of bold, high-impact moment at the top of the stairs. It starts just above the knee on the one on the left-hand side here, and then as we gradually go through year on year, you can see it raising gradually to peak mini in 66, with quite a lot of leg on show on this one. Pretty risque. Really, at that point, miniskirt as a phrase, it's a very accepted part of fashion by that point, and has become a symbol of women's liberation. Something that we absolutely take for granted today, but was pushed by Mary back in the 60s.
Mary Quant didn't just hike up hemlines. Her pioneering approach to pricing transformed the fashion industry.
Her earliest collections were quite expensive and you definitely had to save up to afford it, but Ginger Group was a really clever way of reaching everyday women. And the whole idea of it was meant to be much more affordable and much more accessible. I think if we take it anti-clockwise.
Okay.
Stop.
The Ginger Group label, set up in 1963, was one of Quant's most popular.
In terms of like cost equivalents today, so the mainline collection that Mary did would range from maybe £400, £500 to an ensemble. But the Ginger Group line, that would be on average 150.
Perfect.
And they were also sold not just in the boutiques in London, but in different department stores throughout the UK. A bit more counterclockwise. Perfect.
By 1964, Quant's Ginger Group designs had landed in Sheffield, where Jenny Fenwick first saw her mustard yellow mini dress hanging on the rails. Now, thanks to conservator Francis, it looks as good as it did on that day.
Well, overall, the colours look great. The staining down the front has definitely reduced. So I'm really quite pleased with the outcome because it did look very sad, and I think it holds its own alongside the other dresses on the platform now. It's an enormous pleasure to work on something that somebody's kept and they've treasured, and you feel a great responsibility to present it as best as you can. And my hope would be that when the owner comes to visit, as I'm sure she will, that she'll be very pleased with the result. I'm very proud of her dress and the fact that she kept it.
It's the start of a new week, and Julius's time capsule exhibition is open for business.
Well, this is a surprise.
It's the first time these items, donated by the museum's namesakes,
It was the right thing, but why did you choose it?
It's just really interesting how it's the start of the museum. And
the cornerstone.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the detail on it. I think that's really pretty.
It's really.
And it's cool how it comes out in parts.
Yeah.
So do you think that Queen Victoria used it?
The knife, which is for sharpening a quill, you know, a feather tip, really has been used. You can see it has been sharpened. So I can only guess that is Queen Victoria using it.
Yeah, and you can see paint chips, so it definitely
You
looks
have?
like
Where?
it's... Go around the corners now.
Oh, okay. I've missed them. Yeah.
It's difficult to explain quite why a particular object is my favourite or is the star attraction. But it's the one that just says I've got more to offer the closer you look at me. And this Kashmiri writing case, to me, is a spellbinding magic object that's travelled through time and is just waiting for a new audience to admire it.
we've got Mary Quant, okay, and we're expecting Mary Quant to be extremely busy.
After years of work and appeals to the public, the Mary Quant exhibition is finally opening.
Wow, look at that. It's amazing. All these clothes are so wearable. I think Mary Quant must have revolutionised Jersey, don't you?
Do you remember this dress here?
Oh, that tunicky dress, yeah. It typifies Mary Quant for me.
I had a pair of purple, well, lilac more than purple boots. I loved them to bits.
Aren't those white?
Oh. Wow. Brings it all flooding back. Memories.
Jenny has arrived to see her dress in situ. She hasn't seen it since sending it off in the post 3 months ago.
Oh, there it is! Oh, wow! I just can't believe that's my dress. Wow. Oh, that's amazing. All those years ago. That's just gorgeous. Who would have thought that my little dress that was in a polythene bag in the loft for decades is now in a prime position in the Mary Quant exhibition. I feel very emotional. It was really grubby. In fact, I was quite embarrassed as to how grubby it was. But anyway, they said it would be immaculate, and it is.
It's got centre stage. Yeah, we're very happy. It's a great addition to our collection. It's not just Mary Quant's story, it's all of these women's stories. It's a big responsibility, but it's also the most exciting bit for me, I think, meeting these women and hearing their stories.
It just looks so gorgeous,
It
doesn't
looks
it?
great, doesn't it? It completely underlines why we should be doing an exhibition like this, because this affected so many women's lives. Really, really important. I hope that Mary Quant will be happy, and I hope that all of the women, all of our amazing We Want Quant women will be happy with it. There's a lot of people to please. And I remember you taking yours up a little bit, because you obviously want it a bit shorter. And we were like, should we make it longer? But we've kept it as it is, so it's very faithful to how you had it.
I fancy shortening it. It was probably short enough as it was.
No, I love it. Go shorter, why not?
Yeah. Freedom.
Freedom.
Freedom. Mini skirts for freedom, really.
Next time, conservators battle with a 65-metre-long photograph.
We have some really extraordinary objects in the museum, but you don't see these very often.
A piece of rock and roll history makes its way into the archives.
This is a big moment. I've even got my Ziggy earrings on.
And a Victorian cast gets a facelift.
Does it go all the way along? It does, actually.
Yeah. Having that there without being treated could be fatal for the object.
What does it take to be a museum curator? Watch an extended behind-the-scenes look with the V&A's curators and have a go at curating the museum's collection yourself. Go to bbc.co.uk/Secrets of the Museum and follow the links to the Open University.